Welcome to another episode of the Holistic Sister Circle. Today we have Jessica here with us. She is a licensed eating freely practitioner, having taken advanced training to specialize in this area. This training is internationally approved as an advanced continuing education training for health coaches, nutritional therapists, medical and mental health professionals. She became certified as an eating freely practitioner because she found that the women that she was working with often struggled in their relationship with food. They think about food often throughout the day and frequently lived by many different food rules or go on serial diet plans, each time hoping for the magical cure to get the weight off for good. The Eating Freely program feels like a breath of fresh air for Jessica and really focuses on the whole person so her clients experience a transformation that will provide solutions that last. Jessica, I'm so excited to have you here. And this is honestly a topic that I'm really thrilled to talk about because even for myself, I do find myself sometimes emotionally eating, especially when I'm stressed. And I know I'm not the only person that goes through that. So I'm super excited that we have an opportunity to just share this platform with you. Now, before we start, I would love for you to just share with us what got you into this work. Who is Jessica at 10 years old, working her way up to where she is today?
I love that question. And thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here with you. Jessica at 10 years old was somebody who she was creative. She wanted to be an author. She lived very much in her internal little world that she had created. And if I'm super honest, at 10 years old, I was already turning to food for comfort and helping everyone else. So I kind of came by this caregiving, caring for others, really naturally.
I love that. And thank you for sharing because I don't think people really understand how your emotions and food go hand to hand, hand on hand. Can you
Mhm.
share with us just your relationship with food and how that may have affected or not your just lifestyle in general?
Yeah. So my relationship with food got complicated when I was a kid. My family members, I saw diet a lot growing up, and weight was something that was like talked about often in my household, whether it was for me or just other people, like my mom especially. It was something that I watched her, my grandma, and so many other women that I was surrounded by really struggle with. And so it was like diet foods. I'm on this diet plan. I'm going to do this. My grandma worked for Jenny Craig for a long time. So that kind of conversation was normalized in our household a lot. And just putting themselves down, like body image wise, that kind of stuff was normalized. So of course I just picked up on all of those habits and made them my own, like shaming my own body, shaming my own appetite. The foods that I was attracted to wanting to eat because I loved Eggos for a long time. And we grew up like not also cooking a ton. Like my mom and my dad were very busy professionals. And so they didn't have time to be making, gourmet dinners for us and things like that. So it was this two-sided message of we're eating what's convenient and on hand, and we're on a diet and we don't like our bodies kind of at the same time. So it was a very mixed message system to grow up in. And it wasn't until, I was older and had gone through so many different diet plans by the time I was like 23 years old that I was like, oh, something just doesn't seem right here. And, continued to just be up and down about my own body image until really probably 5 or 6 years ago when I started doing this health and wellness coaching work and feeling like food could be medicine and it can be energetic fuel for our bodies, and just kind of reframing what food is to me, because where it had been comfort and it had been something that can also be very shameful and um, something to be a little bit more like just feel shame and guilt about. It can actually be something that really is healthful and can help us transform our bodies. And it can be a powerhouse energetically for our bodies. And it's such a great tool. for us. It gives us so many wonderful nutrients that we need. So I just kind of transformed how I thought about food, which created a much healthier dynamic in my mind and then ultimately with my body.
Absolutely. And I love that you really brought up this point. I remember last year I was in a program called Surviving Vegan Academy. And before I had entered this 4-week program, we all flew to Miami and we had a 1-day outing. And we learned so much just about how trauma and our emotions are, you can tell really how someone feels by what they put in their mouth. And I had no idea that this was a thing, but we had this chart and it talked about, if, for example, you were someone who wanted, you really crave sweets and you wanted the pies and the cakes and the honey buns. And around that emotional trigger was more geared toward love and self esteem and really not feeling like you have, that either love for yourself or someone is providing that love to you. The same with like bready or crunchy foods. It was more of, um, stress and anxiety, or you had your pastas, and those were like the comfort foods, and those were more around abandonment. And I remember growing up, like, pasta was always my favorite dish, and going into that training I was like, oh my gosh, like my pasta, favorite pasta dish was related to comfort and abandonment. Like I had no idea, or your idea of giving and receiving love. And I would, I'm curious, like, are those some of the things that you talk about just with your clients and in your work, or is that something that is completely separate from when you all have these conversations?
We have, I would say, similar conversations where it's things like we're looking at what the habit loop of what happens when you're triggered and what does it feel like in your body, and then what do you find yourself reaching for, so we can kind of put the same kind of information together. So like when you're angry, are you heading for the Oreos? Or when you're feeling stressed, are you grabbing a bag of chips or popcorn or whatever it is? um and so maybe not quite in the same terms as like the A plus B is like this. So I like what you were sharing though. I haven't heard that. So I'm super curious about it. But we do work on identifying the emotion, figuring out what the triggering event is, and then what's the current behavior. And then also what's the outcome of that? Because what happens, we do a lot of neuroscience in my work, so we're thinking about this as like our brain isn't thinking about the consequence when we're in that triggered and heightened emotional state. We're not thinking about what's going to happen later, or like that we're adding weight or we're impacting our physical or mental health in a negative way. We're thinking about, I need relief. And we're not even thinking about that we need dopamine. That's what our mind is like, I need dopamine right now, I need that snack. We're not so much consciously aware of it, but our brain knows. And it's like, I know I can get that, whether it's from food or Netflix or social media or, you know, pick another substance or something else like that out there. Our brain's like, I know exactly how to get this right now. And I'm going to take care of business getting it without us consciously participating. So, what I'm helping people do is consciously participate in the decision making process.
Yeah, and it's hard. I mean, it's something that I still struggle with because it's like now I know that I'm aware,
Mhm.
but I still find myself doing it from time to time, even though I'm aware that it's happening. And I'm like, okay, I
Totally.
probably shouldn't be doing this, but let me just take a little second. Let me just nibble on this real quick and then let's get back to it. And not really going back to truly uncover like where that is stemming from. Or sometimes I know where it's stemming from and I still want it. So, I know we'll talk about that in a second, but before we do, can you just share with us, how did you decide to say, okay, enough is enough, just from my own experience, I'm going to go down the health coaching route?
I had been a nurse for about 12 years at this point and just burned out of my career multiple times and knew I needed to do something different. So I went into my master's program actually not knowing that I was going to be a health coach. I just fell in love with the process along the way of, I think, health coaching honor, and especially the training that I did, honors something that is lost in traditional medicine, and that's putting the person at the center of it. It's honoring them as the expert and getting curious and asking them, you're coming in because you want something to change. Now, let's partner and collaborate on how we're going to make that change together rather than in traditional healthcare, it's I'm the expert, I have all the answers, and you need to do what I tell you to do. And that has just never felt great to me as a nurse. And, I can't tell you how many people I've seen come back and never made a change, and they've struggled along the way because of that approach.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there any stories just from your nursing days that you can share with us that may be impactful for the audience?
I mean, I worked in mental health for a really long time. And so I can't tell you the number of clients. It's not one story in particular, but just a pattern of behavior that I noticed over and over again is that people would come in because they want relief and they'd be looking for that quick fix. And the doctor would prescribe a medication that then they would take and it would feel terrible. And so then they would stop taking it and come back and be like, oh, it's not working for me because they want something that's going to be a quick fix. But medication comes with side effects. And so they're not really like putting in the work because they also just don't know what it is that they truly want. Like the end feeling is a little bit vague and it's often something that medicine just won't give them. So like they have to put in the work of going to therapy or they have to put in the work of changing some habits or something like that, but they're lost on what to do and how to do it. And so that's what I think is beautiful about health coaching is we figure that out together and figure out a plan for support and accountability so that people can make sustainable change.
Absolutely. No, I love this and I love this topic and just where we're headed. Now, for the clients that you're currently working with now, what are some just, I would say, things that you've shared with them that they can actually apply and be consistent with it? And even though that they are aware, what does it look like for them not to go back to it? Because I don't know if you have clients that are like me, but
Totally. And
what
like
does that
what
look
you
like?
shared with food is so normal. Um, in particular, I have one client that we've been working on binge eating. She's got a binge eating disorder. And so when we met and started working together months ago, she was binging multiple times per day. And so turning to food for comfort constantly. And she felt like she had tried a bunch of different things and it's just nothing had worked. And so we started doing my 16-week program together. And she, after I want to say 8 sessions, we had a break for several weeks just because of the holidays. And while we didn't see each other, she went from when we started working together, binging multiple times per day, to now she binges not even one time per week.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it really is. And she feels confident in her relationship with food overall. And we're still working on things and making progress, but the steps that we've been able to make because she's been able to reduce her binging episodes has just been incredible.
Wow, that's amazing. So, what are some of the things that you take your clients through to get to that break point?
Yeah, there's 4 pillars really of the work that I do with clients on disordered eating. And the first one is we work with CBT tools, so cognitive behavioral therapy tools that produce great results in decreasing the how often we're emotionally eating, overeating, or binge eating. And then the second piece is we walk through nutritional rehabilitation. So we're going through um, what constitutes an actual good meal, how can we make sure you're staying sated for longer, and just kind of evaluating that so that we can get the gut in a better place because that's really important to being it impacts our energy so much. Our mind and mental health is so connected to our gut function, and so motivation and everything really comes from there. So we have to get gut function in a good place. And then next we go through some neuroscience because our brain and habits are just so deeply related with our relationship with food. And then last we go through self-compassion and mindfulness practices.
Wow, okay. This is super helpful because I know, um, and I love the work that you're doing. I know for me, when I was going through just kind of my entire change, I actually I like to call it build a wellness dream team. And I
Mm.
had, a nutritionist I was working with. I had a trauma therapist I was working with. I had, I was in the Surviving Vegan Academy program. Plus, I had a holistic health practitioner. And I really do believe that, like, all of these people, they helped me get to that stage of not just becoming aware, but not feeling guilty, and with the yes or no, right or wrong, and just kind of always being in that fight or flight mentality, but actually get over that to the point where I could now do things that were just best for me and not best for, what people believe to be true for me. And I love that you literally, I mean, you cover all of those things in your program, and you don't have to go to different people to get that because you cover it all in the 16 weeks. So that's really cool. I haven't, talked to anyone that really focuses on every single area for, from a holistic approach to help their client get that outcome. Normally it's like one section of it. Do you find yourself with some of your clients maybe being a little bit, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? Maybe they're not as consistent in certain areas rather than others? Like, are there certain areas where they can really like take this thing and keep and continue to move forward, and there's other areas that maybe they just have some setbacks?
I think the nutritional rehab in terms of the 4 is probably some of the hardest work for people to do at first, just because it's like we're evaluating eating in a new way. And I think what's hardest I've found about it is actually not the eating part. But in this program, we talk a lot about the importance of actually eating regularly. And, there's a $1 trillion business out there in diet culture, helping people feel really terrible about themselves and saying that there's all these rules that they need to have about food in their bodies. And so the hardest part with nutritional rehab is undoing that work and those messaging and helping them out in the world kind of navigate that, because there's still so many people out there living by food rules, and it feels uncomfortable to be like, no, I can actually trust myself to eat and feed myself well.
Absolutely. And how are these people, like, how are your clients finding you?
So I do talks. I will like go into local businesses, or I've done some online and talking about food or burnout, because for a long time that was my business. And otherwise, networking. I've got a really great network where I live. And so people find me there that way. And word of mouth, too, is another really big way that people find me.
Love that. So if we were having a listener right now and maybe they don't even know that what they're doing is emotional eating or binge eating, what are some practical steps or just guidelines that you could take them through
Mm,
just for them to become a bit more aware of what it is that they're doing and know when to seek out help?
yeah, that's a great question. I think to build that awareness, start noticing your relationship with food when you sit down to eat. Do you feel hungry? Do you feel full when you're done? Are you feeling satisfied? And also, I think noticing the patterns of eating. So, are you eating 3 meals a day? Are you constantly kind of eating throughout the day? And then, what's the main motivator there? Like, thinking about a time when you feel stressed. How do you know you're stressed? I guess is one way that I work with clients on this, because a lot of people identify with stress eating. It's just a big thing. It's even marketed out there. Like, as I've done this work, I've been absolutely horrified at the marketing out there that's like, had a bad day, go get a cookie. I'm like, what? That's awful. But yeah, I've seen ads and stuff like that. So just noticing, if you are reaching for food, asking yourself, am I hungry, angry, tired, lonely? Or am I
Mm,
feeling any of these things? And also thinking before you're eating, is this nourishing or is it punishing?
hmm. Now, I'll be honest, sometimes I know what the answer is, but I go for it anyway. What would you say to someone who's like that?
I would say that that's super normal. And part of this program is that when those things happen, we forgive ourselves quickly and we get curious about what would feel better next time,
Mhm.
because we're all
Okay.
going to have those days, honestly.
Yeah.
100%. Like, a person with emotional eating or binge eating tendencies is never going to be 100% free of the problem. It's not a realistic expectation.
And I appreciate you just clarifying that because I know, again, I can only share my own story and my own journey, but I do know that is a thing. Like people think that again, just because they didn't get it perfect or get it right the first time that they have this shame and this guilt and they feel so bad about what it is that they're doing. And now they keep doing it and it's like a cycle. And I'm grateful that you really shared an opportunity for people to have that space, to carve out that space to say, hey, like give yourself grace. Like you're not perfect. This is something that's new that you're doing. And
Mhm.
believe it or not, even if you and I kind of like to go by like the 80-20 rule, which is like 80% of the things that I eat are 100% great. Like I want to make sure I have a good combination of carbs, fats, and protein, and making sure that every single day I have those things. But there are times where I might, snag a bag of Fritos or something, knowing that when I look on the back of the ingredients, I know I shouldn't be having these, but I also know that majority of the time I'm not. So, I'm able to give myself like that grace and those boundaries. Now, for someone who is maybe on the opposite side, right? Maybe they have established, okay, like I have these tendencies, I know what it is, I'm aware of it, but maybe they've gone through a program similar to yours and now they're in a phase where the foods that they were eating in that program they have to actually stop eating because maybe they were eating too much of the same foods. And before you answer this, the reason I'm sharing this with you is because that was me too. When I first started my journey, I had to cut everything out and I was like became 100% vegan because not because I wanted to, but because I didn't know which foods were actually triggering my symptoms. So I had to cut out everything. And I realized that it just so happened that the things that weren't triggering were the vegan lifestyle foods. So now I'm in a position where, fast forward a year later, some gassiness is starting to arise. And for me, I'm like, okay, I haven't really changed anything, but that could be an issue. So I actually had did a bowel test with another company. I don't know if you're familiar with Biome, but I did like a gut health analysis with them. And what I learned in that test was every 4 months we should be re calculate or like re-looking at our results at our gut and making sure that it's at optimal health, which is something that I had never knew that I was supposed to do. I thought, okay, like, I have this lifestyle, I'm good, and then that's it, but didn't know or realize that I needed to revisit. So what would
Mhm.
you say to someone who is in the stage where maybe their symptoms are coming back, maybe they're feeling like they're starting to, go back into that feedback loop because they haven't actually revisited their symptoms.
Mm. I think that's tricky because it just kind of depends on the approach. I would first
Mhm.
kind of try to figure out how much the symptoms are bothering them, and then what's the approach that they want to take. Is it getting some other kind of testing? Is it going back on some kind of elimination diets, which I know can be really challenging for people because I mean, food is food is big, and those lists of elimination diet foods are long. And so for some people, that's just not reasonable for them. So I think I'd have to start with curiosity to see how we approach it and what their ultimate end goal would be. Because like you said, sometimes our gut microbiome is ever changing. It is like the most interesting thing to me, and we don't know enough about it yet. Um, because we're learning new things all the time. It's like as complex as our brains, you know? It is another kind of brain in our body. So I think we would have to kind of start with curiosity and find out, where do we go next? Is it, again, trying to mix it up and eliminate some foods that maybe we've been eating a lot of? Because when we do eat the same thing all the time and not incorporate that variety, we can get some inflammation around those things. And I love hearing you say that you're trying to get a really great balance of carbs, fats, and proteins, because I didn't hear you demonize any of them. And I love that. They're all good for us. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think it would just, that's a complicated, I can't give you a simple answer to it. And I'm so sorry.
No, and that's okay. It may not even be one, but I'm just like, these are some real life like
Mhm.
situations I'm even going through right now. And I'm just like, okay, what are some things that I can make sure that I'm doing? Because, like you said, that diet, or not even diet, but that elimination that I had
Mhm.
to go through during that period of time in my life, like I didn't want to do that. Like I didn't want to have to do that. And when I did it, I was like, oh my gosh, I basically could only eat like this paper
Yeah.
because there were like everything. And moving forward, I know of two big things for me were garlic and onions, and I was putting garlic and onions in all of my food. So now as I read the back of everything, it's garlic and onions and everything. And I'm just like, oh gosh, like what can I eat at this point? So then I get frustrated because
Totally.
I don't know what to eat. And now my relationship with food is back to where it once was, right? Not saying
Mhm.
this is me now, but this is, these are like thoughts that I would have in my head. And, I share this because I think it's important too that people really understand that at the end of the day, no, you're not perfect, but I love what you were saying about just having that curiosity and really knowing like, okay, how bad is it? And is it something that an elimination diet can actually fix? Or do we need to go a little bit deeper? Is there some other things that you may can do that can suit you better in the lifestyle that you're currently living? And I think that's just so important for people to hear, because most people think like, oh gosh, just one person said it, so this is the only way, like I can do it,
Mhm.
when it's just not the case.
Totally. And I think that's it, is we like hear somebody say it on TikTok or even on a podcast or whatever, and we're like, oh, that's the thing I'm supposed to be doing. And I'm like, actually, we're all so different that we're all unique, and what's going to work for one person might not work for us. So I just try to take a
Exactly.
tone of experiment with everything.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Well, I certainly am grateful for your time, Jessica. And before we end, can you just share with us just some ways that people can connect with you if they're looking to work with you one-on-one, or any programs that you, of course, have now, any events coming up? We would love to hear about it.
Yeah, thank you. On my website is thisisyourlifecoaching.com, and you can find me on the Instagram. That's new. I just got back on social media. So it's This Is Your Life Health Coaching is my handle there. And I'm on Facebook and LinkedIn. And I don't have any events coming up in the next couple of weeks. I do have a ladies' night event in the Minneapolis area coming up in April. So you can check out my website for that. It's going to be great. We're going to be having real conversations about food, which I think is important.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure. Queen, thank you so much for tuning in. It truly warms our heart that you're taking the time out of your day to connect with us. If you'd like to connect with our guests further, you can find their information located in the description section of this episode. And if you found this episode helpful, share with another queen. And don't forget to connect with the Holistic Sister Circle on Instagram and Facebook. And until next week, stay blessed. Mwah.